Hey guys, so today I've got a video I'm really excited about, and I think that if this goes well, this might turn into a series on my channel, but I'm going to be sharing with you 7 ways to repurpose a face powder. So maybe you're trying to use up some face powders and you want to find some ways to maybe multitask them so that you can go through them faster. I know I personally have way too many face powders and I'm just trying to go through them. Or I'm also a really big proponent of finding new ways to use products that maybe you don't enjoy for their intended purpose. I think in this beauty community there's a lot of focus on decluttering a product when it doesn't work for you, but for the average consumer that may not be realistic. I think, if you've spent your hard-earned money on your makeup collection, you might prefer to maybe get creative and find a new way to use a product that you're not enjoying rather than just immediately giving up on it and giving it away or throwing it out. So if any of that applies to you, hopefully these tips will help you out. But my first tip is to use your face powders as an eyeshadow. You know how a lot of eyeshadow palettes will come with like a matte cream color? Face powders are basically the same thing. So anytime you would normally use a shade like that, you can also use any old face powder. So my first tip is to use it to set your eyelid primer. I know some people prefer not to set their eyelid primer, some people do it every time. I personally like to just kind of set from my crease up to my brow bone. I feel like that helps my crease colors blend better, but I like to leave my lid tacky so that my shimmers can really cling to them. But I really do feel like that helps a lot with just the blendability of the rest of my shadows. So that is tip number 1. My second tip is to use it as a brow bone highlight and also just to kind of clean up around the edges of your eye look. I do this almost every single day with a powder or with, whatever cream matte shadow is in the eyeshadow palette that I'm using, but any palette that doesn't have a cream matte eyeshadow, I'll just use my face powder for this. The brush I like to use is this Eco Tools. I don't think they sell this anymore. They call it their crease brush. It came in a set a million years ago, but it's sort of like a fluffy angled brush, but it still has some kind of density to it. So any brush that you would normally use for like your brow bone highlight, anything that's kind of fluffy but also has some density to it will work. And this tip especially works best for a powder that has at least some coverage to it. Probably wouldn't work super great with a translucent powder, but this powder in particular, the one that I'm using as my example is the Jordana Forever Flawless pressed powder. This is no longer sold, but whatever powder with some coverage that you have, or powder foundation. And I do this pretty much every single day. I get kind of messy with my eyeshadow, so I'll just take it, highlight my brow bone, and just kind of blend out the edges of my eyeshadow. And then also in this region, kind of the outer corner, sometimes I get too far out there and I'll just take it and sort of sweep up in that direction, and it just kind of corrects any messy mistakes that I made with my eyeshadow. So once I started doing that, I never went back. I do it pretty much every day that I do my eyeshadow. My third tip applies to any eyeshadow or powdered cheek product like a blush or bronzer that is either too dark for your skin tone or you just want to make it lighter for, the look that you're creating. You can literally mix your face powder with any eyeshadow that you have to just lighten it. So let's say I am using this deep purple here from my BH Cosmetics palette. I'm going to show kind of an example, not on my eyes, but on the back of my hand. So this is that shadow just on its own, blended with my, fluffy crease brush here. So let's say I want to use that shadow as more of like a soft transition color. So first I'm going to dip into my face powder, just tap into it a few times, and then go into the purple. So you can see how that just made it a lot softer and more subtle. You can really customize any eyeshadow in your collection, especially matte shadows. I feel like it works best. And then another way that I've been using this trick a lot lately is with this Wet n Wild Franken bronzer that is a bit too dark for me. I will just tap my bronzer brush into the powder a few times first and then into the bronzer, and I just find that it blends out much more easily with my skin tone. So anytime you've got a cheek product that's a bit too dark for your skin tone, you can use this trick and you still get the color of that cheek product, just toned down a little bit. Now, I mentioned frankening your products. I'm still not sure if that's a verb, but we're gonna pretend that it is. But my fourth tip is to create franken products. If you've got powders that maybe you just don't like the way they look as a setting powder, or maybe you don't even use setting powder, but you still want to find a way to use up some of your face powders, you can create franken bronzers, blushes, eyeshadows. So in this case, I mixed together 4 eyeshadows. If you want to make something like this lighter, you can add some face powder, or maybe you're mixing a bunch of different eyeshadows together to create a new shade. Add a little bit of powder to lighten it. So you can really like pretend to be a mad scientist and get creative, have some fun, create new products with what you already own. Like I said, I made a Franken bronzer. This is just a bunch of eyeshadows mixed together, but I'm kind of wishing what I had done was mixed a little bit of like a skin toned face powder with it to make it a little bit lighter, and also to mattify it a bit, because most of the shadows in here were somewhat shimmery. So it's a very glowy bronzer on its own. What I might do in the future, I don't know, I might be too lazy to do this, but I might just crush this up again and mix it with a little bit of a face powder, just so that I don't have to dip into a powder separately every time I use it. But the way that I've been doing it now has also been working just fine. All right, so for tip number 5, this will work especially well for any loose powders that you have, but you can also crush up any pressed powder to create a loose powder for this if you want to. But you can mix any loose powder or crushed up pressed powder with your moisturizer to create kind of a custom coverage tinted moisturizer. So if you add more powder, you're gonna get more coverage. Less powder is gonna be more of just like a skin tint. And you can mix a bunch together all at once to just create like one new tinted moisturizer, or you can just do it day by day and add as much powder as you want each day depending on how much coverage you're looking for. But that's another way to quickly go through a powder that maybe you're not loving as a setting powder. And bonus, it's also a great way to repurpose and use up a moisturizer. I know that I have some moisturizers in my stash that are not quite rich enough for my skin to use as a moisturizer, so that would be a great way to repurpose them and use them up a little bit faster. My 6th and final tip is to use your face powder as a powder foundation. So maybe if you've been wanting to try a powder foundation like in the summer, but you don't want to go out and buy one that's specifically labeled a powder foundation, you can totally use just your regular face powder for this purpose. Again, this is probably not something that's going to work for like a translucent face powder, but any powder that already has a little bit of coverage, switch up which brush you're using and you can get a completely different look and finish and coverage level than what you're used to. So normally with a face powder, you might be used to using like a fluffy face brush, but if you switch to like a more dense foundation brush and sort of buff it into your skin, you might be surprised with how much coverage you're able to get. And also, when you're using a face powder as a powder foundation, you're probably going to use more of it at a time, especially with a dense brush. Dense brushes just, you're going to be able to hit pan faster. So try that out, especially if you don't want to go out and buy a whole new product for that purpose. You might be surprised with what you can achieve with the face powder that you already have on hand. So those are my 6 tips to repurpose your face powders. I hope you found this video helpful, maybe got some new ideas, but moral of the story is just get creative. You'd be surprised with how much you can do with one makeup product that you may never have thought of. But I'd love to hear your tips for repurposing a face powder down in the comments. Also, if I do end up turning this into a series, let me know in the comments what type of product you want me to do next. I could do blush, highlight, I don't know, let me know what you're feeling. But if you enjoyed this video, I'd love to see you again soon. I upload 3 videos a week, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future uploads, and hopefully I'll talk to you very soon in my next video. Bye!